I'll do that. Thank you everyone for joining us on Live Bees this evening. Tonight I'm joined by Amanda Diamond. Before we start talking, I would like to start by acknowledging the Palawa people as the traditional and continuing custodians of Lutruwita, Tasmania, where we're recording this interview from today. We honour their history and deep connection to this land and its waters, which have never been ceded, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. So tonight we're joined by Amanda Diamond, as I mentioned. Amanda, reading your bio was incredible. Here is a very brief synopsis for everybody. In 2015, while standing in front of an Artemis statue in Turkey, Amanda's fascination for bees was spiked as the marble goddess was absolutely covered in bees. Returning to Australia, Amanda attended a beekeeping workshop at an activist Skillshare event and fell in love with bees, launching an 80-year global love affair, which has taken her all over the world. From Russian vents to the healing powers of apitherapy in Slovenia, learning adventures in Romania, volunteering in London, and establishing the Honey Road tours in Morocco, Amanda is a woman driven towards a purpose. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us tonight. I couldn't help but be completely twinged by your fascination of how your beekeeping journey started with Artemis. So can we start there, please, and just have a little bit of a chat about what tell us about that experience in Turkey?
Well, one of my little hobby passions is pre-Abrahamic archaeology. So I was in Turkey to visit Göbekli Tepe on the borders of Syria. And whilst there, someone said, have you been to Ephesus, which I hadn't been to. So afterwards, I scooted across the country, saw these marble statues, and I'm familiar with the sort of goddess animals, the bulls and the lions and the vultures. But this one was covered in bees, and that started off a huge sort of reading and research program, reading everything I could about, oh, are we back on here? Can you see me, Jen?
Absolutely.
Mine's just gone off. Okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
Yeah, great. Okay. So read a lot about how bees were a sacred creature at the time of matriarchal spiritual practice, when the females were the head of a nature-based religion or spiritual practice, which went right the way through the culture. So, of course, the community of a beehive, of a bee colony, is matriarchal, with the queen, the goddess, with all the sort of neophytes, all the worker bees. And so the beehive and the bee colony became a very, very strong symbol for the goddess culture. And after the first time I came back to Morocco, I then went on to Malta to explore this further. And I went to beehives there that are pre-Christianity, pre-Islam, amazing goddess central temples with beehives. And in Delphi in Greece, which is one of the height of the goddess culture, where women priestesses did prophecies, and there still are to this day stone beehives built into the foundations of the temple. Yeah, wow. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah,
it's so amazing.
Bees and beekeeping and bee healing have been bound into this nature practice long before the Abrahamic religions took over. And one of the things that's interesting here for me is half of the population here come from pre-Islamic and pre-invasion indigenous groups of people who still have this thread of nature practice going through their culture. Yeah. As there is in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we're actually speaking to you in Morocco tonight, or it's
Yeah,
morning for you over there. So can you tell
yeah.
us a little bit about that in Morocco? I understand that, again, beekeeping is a very ancient practice in Morocco. And again, it is something that's very different to what we experience in Australia. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, beekeeping has been recorded here with the original, if you like, we would say First Nations people, the Amazigh people here, and there are depictions on rock art in the Maghreb going back to over 10,000 pre-10,000 years of collecting wild honey. So that a bit like in Australia, it has been known that sugar bag honey, collecting wild honey from wild sources, has definitely been going on for an awful long time. So here, ancient practices still prevail out in the countryside. I've been, last year I traveled all over this country, and I still am discovering more and more about the beekeeping practices. And up high in the Atlas Mountains in Amazigh villages, I found traditional practices that haven't changed for millennia, really, both in terms of hives and the way honey is collected and the way the whole relationship with nature and the honey is connected. Ancient practices that haven't changed up in the mountains and also down in the desert as well. I saw some different and other ancient practices down there, and actually did beekeeping with these people to see how they do things. Yeah.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I've seen images of you with woven beehives.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a prop.
Yeah, fabulous. We love props.
Because I've always got one in the house.
Yeah.
So this is a traditional Moroccan cylindrical woven beehive. Similar that you would see, I've seen them in Indonesia, I've seen them further south in Gambia and Senegal. In spring, a particular weaving village will weave these, and they will weave a whole load of them and then sell them to the local beekeepers. I bought this one at a farmer's market about 20 kilometers outside of the town where I live, that sells everything from camels to beehives to hose and buckets. I love it. It's my favorite market, and I bought
All the
this out there.
household items that you need, Amanda.
Sorry?
All the household
Everything I
items that
need. I know. It's
animals.
big straw hats. It's just fabulous. And everyone out there is, you go early morning, the animals sell first because of the heat. And when you get there, there's people driving away with utes with like 5 donkeys on the back and a camel, and everyone's pulled up with their donkey cart to arrive at the market and take home everything for the farm. Yeah, so you buy these out in the villages and in the farmers markets out of town, and these are similar to the Indonesian log hives, Gambian log hives. Normally I have seen these more vertical, and in the south, in the desert, they hollow out lengths of palm tree. So they have vertical logs with a hole at the bottom, and they fill them with mud, and they leave these in the palmeries for the bees to discover. These ones I've seen only lying flat on the floor like this, not vertical.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They make, so out in the countryside, up in the high Atlas, there's very, very little there. It's scrub, lots and lots of rock, lots of scrubby plants. And they build a low platform of rocks. Then they set these hives one after the other in a row. They cover them in mud and animal dung, and they cut a slice of a fallen log to put across the top like a lid. And then they lie them all down, and then cover them in everything they can find. So rocks, bits of palm fronds, cardboard at the side of the road, rubbish, and they pack insulation right the way across the top. And then that's your apiary, and it sits there on the floor, and the bees, they make a little hole in the with the mud, and the bees come and go. And at the end of the season, well, it doesn't matter if these get destroyed, because they're, you know, they're not going to hurt the ground, and everything is dismantled from the inside and brought to market or filtered out for honey.
So what happens to...
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, so when that happens, obviously they set up in the spring, they do all that insulation, they get everything sorted, the bee season moves through. The end of the season, when they collect the honey, what happens to those bees?
Well, a lot of the brood and so forth will be put, either left if they can, or put into another one. But it's a very, I mean, in some ways it's very sustainable because it's all natural and so forth, and that you're not having to use foundation. But of course, in terms of the colony, it's very disruptive. And there has been quite a move here in Morocco to try and shift beekeeping into boxes so that honey can be removed without endlessly destroying the brood and the colony, so they can get stronger. And there is a big problem here at the moment with the huge drought, with many, many bees dying off. So they need it. This is great. This is the ancient way of doing things, but many of the apiaries I've seen, if people can afford to buy or make the boxes, they have both going on now. They have the cylindrical weave, and they have a box, not unlike a lamb's trough, really.
And I imagine with more of an industrial style hive, they'd be able to make more money potentially from that type of hive as well, because you're not losing the bees, you're able to replace the frames. But what does that mean culturally for people in Morocco?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've talked to all different sorts of beekeepers, from tiny little villages up in the hills where they've got one or two of these. One man just dug a hole in the ground and put sticks over it, and the bees lived in there, you know, as minimal as that. But the other side of it, like in Australia and elsewhere, is there is a pollination industry here. Morocco is a huge producer of food, fruit and nuts, particularly, not just for here, but for Europe as well. And there is a lot of migration of hives up to big orange plantations, the big almond plantations for collecting honey. And when you're moving the hives about, as in Australia or wherever, the Langstroth style can be stacked in the back of a ute and carried safely up to be relocated. And because of the way honey is collected here, it's much more, it's very, very determined by the plants. So hives get moved around a lot. So people who are doing that are definitely using the boxes. But when you're up in the tiny villages, where it's very poor, that the houses are made of stone and mud, there's really very little there. The hives are like this, just covered in rubble, and they will stay like that because they will always be affordable, they will always be usable, you know, for the people just doing subsistence farming and subsistence beekeeping. Yeah.
And from what you're saying, it sounds like beekeeping then for Moroccan people will always remain accessible, because people will be resourceful and use what they have where they are to make it possible.
Well, it's one of the things I love about Morocco, full stop, is its amazing resourcefulness and its amazing capacity to mend things, recycle things, reuse things, repurpose. And I like that, and I love that here. it's wonderful. You know, you go to the junk markets here, which I'm addicted, and people will
True.
mend and recycle. Yeah. Stuff that, oh, we would see on our nature strips in Australia, abandoned long ago, are lovingly collected and remade, you know. And I ride a bicycle here, and I mean, at every turn, there's always someone to fix something on your bike, and, you know, yeah.
Before I'm very excited to talk to you about your honey road tours, but I think I'd like to finish on that today. So I'm also very interested in your journeying around apitherapy. I know some people know what it is, a lot of people don't. You've obviously been to Slovenia and to Romania, and you've learned a lot about apitherapy there. Could you tell us about how that impacts your beekeeping practice?
Yeah, sure. Well, oh, apitherapy is amazing. I mean, I actually, that's what triggered me to go to Eastern Europe, was seeing a photograph of a bee house at a Russian bee vet's house in Melbourne, Australia. And I said, what is this? You know, it's a little, looks like a little tiny house, but with bees flying in and out of it.
Yeah.
And some of them are on wheels. And I give a whole talk about bee houses in Eastern Europe. It's very amazing and picturesque. And I was like, whoa. And off I went on another research, and ended up going to Slovenia to look on a, you know, to look at bee houses particularly. And while I was in Slovenia, met a beekeeper who was doing biodynamic beekeeping and healing with bees, with vibrational tools based on, he was basically had microphones going into the hive, and the vibrations were then used to a bit like a gong bath, but with bees, I suppose. Anyway, fascinating. He didn't speak English really, which was tricky. We had a translator. But I found out that there was someone in Romania that teaches this every now and again. So a couple of years later, I went to Romania and studied with him. And that just opened, whoa, a whole world of stuff for me, because healing with bees is enormous. It's global, but for many cultures, it's a bit of a forgotten practice. And it's starting to have more traction now. And there's a bit more discussion about it. I'm actually going to give a paper about apitherapy here in Morocco at the Australian Apitherapy Conference that's coming up, specifically about apitherapy. But the interesting thing here is, so when I came back to Morocco about 4 years ago, I saw this whole wealth of beekeeping and honey production, but also that they have ancient apitherapy practice here, which just warmed my heart, because it meant that there was a whole different attitude towards bees, honey, and beekeeping. And the interesting thing is that this is an ancient practice. So there's huge amount of herbal healing here in Morocco, and apitherapy is sort of part of that phytotherapy, apitherapy, natural healing process that happens here. And with Islam coming to Morocco, the interesting thing is that there is a part of the Quran that is dedicated to bees. And there are two really interesting things about that. One is that it talks about the fabulous matriarchal community of a bee colony, and it's written in the feminine, which is not so usual in the Quran. And secondly, it talks about honey and bee products as a cure, as a medicine. So that is completely interwoven into the country, the culture, the faith here, and in other parts of Islam as well. So for people here, being cured with bees and honey and so on is not in any way unusual. And here in Essaouira, just round the corner from me, you can go to the local pharmacy and make an appointment with Mohammed, and he will arrange to sting you with bee venom for your arthritis and so on. I do this also in Australia. And then there's another medicinal honey shop not far away, also run by a very strong Islamicist, and you go there to buy honey, but also for your ailments. So if you have a cough, he'll prescribe a particular honey. If you've got gastric bacteria inflammation, he'll prescribe another honey. So apitherapy is very much part of daily life here. And people are just as likely to go to the honey shop or the herbal shop as they would be to go to a sort of Western-based pharmaceutical doctor.
Now, am I correct in understanding that apitherapy also includes, you see in Eastern Europe, they put breathing apparatus onto the hives and people breathe the air from the hives. And I've also seen beds that have been made where people lay on top of the bed, the vibration of the bees. Well, that's
well, I have all of that in Australia. I have a bee house in Australia that I made, and the bees fly into it, and then inside I have attached a bee breathing apparatus straight from the hive. And last summer, a neighbor friend of mine who's been suffering from asthma most of his life came every day for a month and breathed bee air like as a meditation for half an hour. And he said it's the first time he's been able to go out on a bicycle without taking his puffer. So in Romania, where I studied and also where I visited many bee houses, the claim is 10 days of 1 to 2 hours a day. You go in with your apparatus on and you breathe the air. And better still, if you can lie, as you said, on top of the hives, so that the vibration of the hives underneath the bed come through, and you go into a very, very deep state of relaxation, and then you breathe the bee air and drink some honey water. I've done this in Slovenia, and at the end of the session, I was so fast asleep. I mean, it was magnificent. Yeah, great. I also treat anxiety and depression that way as well.
Yeah. Okay. So you're
in
talking
fact,
about
there's a documentary coming out in Australia. I'm not sure when it's coming out. A man called Todd Sampson came and did a documentary with me about apitherapy, and I stung him to show what it's like. So there's some hands-on stuff in that documentary. I'm not sure when it's coming out in Australia. Yeah.
The other part of bee venom as well, which I've been reading about recently, is that it can treat Lyme disease. Apparently Lyme disease is not in Australia, but I do know people who have it, and they were asking me for bees so they could treat their Lyme disease with bees. I don't know very much about it, but nothing would surprise me.
No, it doesn't surprise me either. The enzymes in bee venom are very powerful antidotes to viral things. So, for example, I've had very bad viruses in the past, and I get stung anyway as a beekeeper. And there is this, at the beginning of my apitherapy talks, I always start with that old wives' tale, the adage that beekeepers live longer. Well, whether that's the case, but it is scientifically, bee venom does help mend the end of chromosomes, which is our aging process. So there is, that old adage, there is some sort of scientific evidence now that could be the case. But I have had severe arthritis in the past and have suffered from a very nasty virus. And I do get stung, obviously, handling the bees at the apiaries. But I do deliberately sting myself in particular places where, like topically, where my arthritis is, And I do believe that it's really, really helped me. Yes. Yeah.
I know a few people who do that as well, Amanda. It's yeah, even if
Mm.
it's anecdotal, it doesn't matter. If it works for you, it works for you.
Exactly. And I mean,
Mm.
here you can, like I say, you can just go to the busy pharmacy, make an appointment, and he'll come and sting you, you know, here in this little town. And this is, nobody even bats an eyelid here, that is what you do. You know, the fishermen that come in with sort of a bit of arthritis, they go and get stung, you know, and it works. And yeah, I mean, here, because it's part of daily life, people wouldn't consider, oh, well, I mean, when I've given talks on apitherapy in Australia and the UK, there's been quite a bit of skepticism coming up in the chats, you know, and it's like, well, come and try it. I mean, I'm sure any medicinal thing, if you haven't tried it, may seem far-fetched. And I would never persuade anyone to do anything, but having tried my own recipes that I make all sorts of potions and medicines now that are based on ancient remedies. And I had people coming back who said they just took these medicines when they had COVID. I make the claim I never get cold or flu, will never need a flu jab because I take this particular medicine I make. And it's an ancient recipe and it's super simple and it's organic and it works for me. So, you know, that's great.
Do you sell it? Do you sell the recipe, or are you willing to
Yeah,
share it without?
I
Yeah,
sell
okay.
it in Australia. At the apiary where I've got all my bees in Australia, it's on a fabulous permaculture farm. And on a Saturday, we have a farm gate with all the organic food and meat and my honey and all my products, and people come and taste it. And once they've tried it, I get a lot of repeat people back, because once you've tried it and it works for hay fever, influenza, any sort of mucusy, you know, you're fine. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
sell online as well?
I'm not at the moment, but I can do. I've been considering doing that. Yes.
Good. Well, let us know when you do, because I think you might have a
Yeah,
few new customers listening in tonight. Now, Amanda, you are
great.
listening to you talking about your global travels. Obviously, you come to Australia as well. You volunteer in London from time to time. Reading your bio, it's quite obvious that you've been connected to beekeeping through Skillshare activist learning, which is really community-based learning. It's a very different model of learning. I'm interested in that as a community builder. I'm very interested in how communities are built and how you are a part of that community and how you actually, uh, watching the work you do, because I know we've talked privately in the past, I see you taking that into a realm that will change people's lives, not just in Australia, but overseas. So I'm very interested in your take on that Skillshare model.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I never underestimate the power of volunteering, if you like. I have learned so much. I am extremely grateful to be urban in London, where I volunteer and love working. Whenever I'm in London, I was there a couple of weeks ago, spend one day a week at Be Urban. And so I think volunteering is a wonderful space to openly learn without the hierarchies, really, and without any monetary, so it's open to all. And because I had initially learned beekeeping at a Skillshare festival, actually run by a group of anarchists at a squatted warehouse in the western suburbs of Melbourne, fabulous teacher. We had no equipment. We put plastic bags on with gaffer tape. Everyone was like all tattooed up and amazing. Fell in love with the whole process. I was old enough to be everyone's mother and loved the day. It was just lots of young activists, swapping skills for free. There were people doing everything from blacksmithing to screen printing, beekeeping, knot tying, cooking for free from dumpsters, you name it. So I've always given forward by always doing like an open day at my apiary where people can come for free, see bees, have a taste. I just think that's really important. And I also think it's just really important economically that people have access to whatever they want to do. They don't. I see some of the courses online now, and I'm not, that's everyone's got their own thing, but some of the courses, especially in the UK, which is a very expensive place, incredibly expensive. Well, there's only a certain sort of person that's going to afford those beekeeping classes. So I always have very either reasonably priced community prices or free come and try days. And in exchange as well, I like to volunteer. So certainly Bee Urban has been a great pleasure volunteering there. I'm very interested in their social enterprise business model, kind of like a bit like take from the rich, give back to, because they host hives for corporations, including the Bank of England and other places. And the money they get from that allows them then to run free workshops for disadvantaged people in South London. So people from Housing Commission, people with disability challenges, and certainly the biggest thing, which is economic challenges in South London. So I love the model. I love it. Yeah. And happy to contribute,
Yeah. And so just going back to Bee Urban, I mean, that's an interesting model of operation, because it's one that I would also support 100%. If you can leverage corporations to for a better cause, so that you can activate more disadvantaged communities, it's going to be a win for everybody at the end of the day. So with Bee Urban, do they, with everyone who is learning in the hives, do the people that volunteer in the hives then get to sell the products from the hive and work the hives, or is there some kind of investment made by them that then is returned back to those corporations?
Well, so the corporations are being charged to manage hives. It's a very popular boutique industry over there. They're really using it for offsetting. Offsetting their position in society.
They're good corporate citizens. Good corporate citizens, yeah.
So they're offsetting their corporate status, let's say, by paying this social enterprise to manage their hives. They get some interesting tax breaks from that, but that's neither here. But the other thing is then the honey becomes their corporate gifts. It's a gift process that they then use to keep their sustainable face going. So I'm not sure that buy a jar of honey at a party might offset the Bank of England's role in the monetary system. But, but anyway, the money that then is paid by those corporations goes back into the pool at Bee Urban. Then volunteers come in. They get to learn all different things. There's volunteers helping with the honey, with the hives, and so on, and all different aspects. And then they really bring in as many different layers of the community as they can to work there with different projects. It's quite involved, really. But it's, in partnership with the council that are giving them a spot in a garden, in a public park, which is great, and the whole thing is highly open and visible. It's very transparent, and I love it. And I really enjoy the people I work with there, and big shout out to them. So it's great. And wonderful. Here I've got a two-pronged thing happening here with the beekeeping. I'm going to be looking after bees on an organic farm for a fully working organic farm that has its own restaurant and produces organic food for the town here. So I'm going to manage their bees for them, but also I'm currently looking for hosts to put my own hives out on gardens, because I live right in the Medina. I'm right in the centre of an old walled town. I can't keep bees here. We're all jam-packed, you know, we're all squished together. And so I'm also currently this week going out to visit potential host gardens. People also, not just with gardens, but people with an interest in nature and all of that, you know, the bigger picture. So I'm going to look to see where my hives might go this week. Yeah, then
fabulous.
I'm going to keep this ones, and I'm also going to keep boxes as well out on there. And then I hope once the bee's established that I can take people out there to introduce some beekeeping, and we'll see.
Fabulous. Yeah. And would it be part of your honey road tours, or can we go back now just before we throw the floor for questions? Can we have a chat about the honey road tours? I'm very interested in how you established it and what you know, if I was to come on one of your tours, or any of the people who have joined us tonight were to come along, what could we expect?
Well, this came about because last year I spent quite a few months, and I'm still doing it really, researching beekeeping in all its different locations and practices throughout Morocco. So last year, as I was, you know, I hired cars, I got public transport off to the desert and all sorts of things. And I saw a lot. And as I was looking at all these things, I realized that the beekeeping was a beautiful thread to take you to places that you might not otherwise go in Morocco. I mean, there's 1,000 tours that will take you to Fez, Marrakesh, come here perhaps, beautiful places, but these will take you to Marrakesh and Essaouira, but they will also take you to little villages up in the mountains, to remote places, to small places, more traditional places, people who don't speak English or French. And so when I went there, I started putting this together. And then it got sort of whittled down, as it had to a 9-day, 10-night tour, Marrakesh to Marrakesh in a circle. So easy access flights in and out. And Marrakesh is such a great place to start and finish anything, especially if you've never been to Morocco before. So we start in the big, exotic, busy city, the labyrinth, capital of Morocco. It's exotic and fabulous and everything, you know, you might think. And then we pretty much hoik everyone out up to the mountains, where we look at beehives way, way, way up in the Atlas, up on stony mountains. And we will have to go on ponies to visit the hives there, or walk up the paths, because there's no vehicle access there. And beautiful place. It's where the stone fruit and a lot of nuts are produced. There's some very interesting women's cooperatives up there, hopefully visit. And then we go from there down to here, where I live now, which is an ancient trading port, many thousands of years old. People have been trading food and all sorts of things here, gold, all sorts, salt. The Phoenicians traded shells from here. It's an ancient walled town, very picturesque. And here a lot of honey is produced, and argan oil. This is the only place in the world where argan oil, there's a biosphere, a UNESCO area for this unique tree. And here in Essaouira, we'll look at how honey and argan oil is mixed in food. We'll do workshops on grinding it up and making things, and you know, in between, go with guides and see this extraordinary city. You know, it's amazing here where I live. And then we go down the rugged coast where the rocks and the cliffs meet. As far as you can see the Atlantic Ocean, with just a few stone houses. It's like, whoa, all the way down. We follow the coast all the way down. Stop on the way, people selling honey, go down to Agadir. Agadir in itself isn't a particularly interesting town. There's a lot of package holidays there, and it's on the sea. But the interesting thing about Agadir, it's the place where all the agriculture from the Sioux Massa, this big area of the Susi skin group, who are great Amazigh farmers and beekeepers, they bring their stuff to Agadir, and then it's then distributed. So the reason we go to Agadir is to El Had Market, which is wall-to-ceiling honey, just amazing. You will taste every kind of honey, and there are people selling honey and nuts and argan oil, and you'll see the sheer volume. And this is all real, gorgeous, handmade organic honey. No labels, just jars to the ceiling. It's fantastic. And so Agadir has an interest, to see all these different sorts of honey and produce that come from this region, and amazing honeys there that you won't find anywhere else in the world, like cactus honey, euphorbia honey, argan honey, beautiful honeys, wild thyme honey, gorgeous, and all from that scrubby anti-Atlas low rocky mountain area. And then from Agadir, pièce de résistance is we go to Inzerki, which is a UNESCO claimed the biggest collective beehive in the world. And it is, I was so excited to go there. And it is wonderful. It's a huge, it stretches right the way across the hill. It's ancient. It was first decreed by the king, and it's a very ancient beehive, all made out of mud and wood, and these cylindrical hives slot into it. So originally there were hundreds and hundreds of hives there. And it's set high in the mountains. It's not near anything, just a few Amazigh villages. And it's spectacular. And there's nothing like it in the world, So we go to Inzerki for the whole day, where at the end, near the end of this trip, we'll also be sitting down and talking about climate change, the effects of climate change here, and what the effect that's had on plants, bees, and also the livelihood of the subsistence farmers here. And then the final hooray is to Marrakesh, where we will be cooking food in the furnaces that burn the bathhouses, and we'll be cooking in giant pots under the hammams with honey chicken, and seeing all the fabulous honey that's also on show in Marrakesh. So back to Marrakesh and then finish. Yeah.
Oh, Amanda, I don't know about anybody else, but I can smell that honey chicken. What a beautiful, vivid image you've painted of your tours around on the Honey Road. Just incredible, collective beehives. What a concept. Who would have ever thought that was something that existed in the world?
Yeah.
Incredible.
It's something very
yeah.
This is the first bee tour here that I've put together called the Honey Road.
Yeah.
So it's definitely for beekeepers, but it's also for people who they will get to see Marrakesh and Essaouira, these beautiful, unusual and ancient cities full of culture. But they'll also get to sit down in a Berber house, in an Amazigh house, and have the hospitality as they wash your hands for you, and there's goats around you, and, all the women are in a different section, and they will get to see, my guests will get to see things that they wouldn't otherwise. And the idea too is that it's small groups. So if something along the road, we see a honey seller, or there's a donkey cart going to market full of honey, we stop, it's got that sort of, as if we're doing a private tour feel to it. Yeah.
An itinerary with lots of flexibility by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
How lucky are your guests?
Something for everyone, definitely for beekeepers, but for anyone who's just interested in a mixed cultural experience here, really, other than just... there's a lot to see in Morocco. It's a fascinating place. But this just gives you a little taste of part that triangle, if you like. I mean, there's so many other treasures down in the deserts and up north in Fez and so on. I've met really interesting honey producers and beekeepers elsewhere who have very different. But I think in 10 days, it's better to have quality than quantity. And I don't want to do the 16-hour drive down to the desert to see the beekeeping there, because everyone will just be exhausted by it. So, you know,
people have to have something to come back to as well. You know, you can't do everything in 10 days.
No.
Amanda, if people were interested in finding out more about your tours, where would they go to find that information?
Well, I will be posting soon on my Facebook and Instagram under Amanda Diamond. And I will send you a link as well.
Great.
So
Fabulous.
put it up our wonderful women's beekeeping platforms as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. Now, before I'm just looking at the time, and before I open up the floor to questions from people, there's 5 questions I always ask our guests that come on to Live Bees. And the first one for you tonight is, what's your best advice for happy bees?
Happy bees? Leave them alone.
We hear that a lot.
As much as possible. I mean, if they're looking happy and you don't need to do an inspection, or you don't, just leave them alone as much as you can. More observation and less opening. Yeah.
Good advice. And so what's your best advice then for new beekeepers?
Ooh, find some mentor, find a mentor, when I started beekeeping, I threw myself into it. And I volunteered in Melbourne at the Children's City Farm Apiary. And every Sunday morning I'd go down there, and everyone there was over 70. Fabulous. I worked all those hives with those guys. I learned so much from them. Find yourself someone who's been beekeeping for a long time and just hang out with them, because you're going to learn more with them than any books or classes you ever will, you know. And I'm very grateful to the people on my journey that I volunteered with and learned so much from. Yeah.
100%. Your best bee-friendly plant, Amanda?
Ooh, anything purple, really, I would say. I plant in Australia, in Venus Bay, I planted a bee garden all around my bee house, and everything there is purple, you know, so sage, thyme, rosemary, you know, all the, because when I was in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, I went to the Botanic Gardens, and they were doing a very, very interesting study observing the plants through ultraviolet, which is how a bee sees them. And then you start seeing which plants attract the bees, the white, the purple, the ultraviolet. So I planted bee gardens in my local school in Australia, and it was just all purple, basically. Yeah.
Gorgeous. Have you got photographs?
Yeah, I've got photographs of my garden in Australia, probably some of the school as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Post some so we can see them. We'd love to see it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, your favorite honey?
Ooh, well, here it's cactus. Because it's extraordinary. It's got like a chili bite at the end of it.
Wow.
It's an extraordinary honey. It kind of bites you at the end. And it's very good for sore throats and so on. And at home, my bees, bless them, where I live on the salt marsh on the southern coast of Victoria, looking out over the ocean, my bees feed on the leptospermum in the sand dunes. So come early November, my bees make the best Manuka honey, and I have to say it's fabulous. Where I live, like Tasmania, very, very clean air, incredibly clean water, clean beaches. You know, it's got that bite in the air, and the honey's just spectacular that my bees produce there. Yeah, at that season.
Lovely. And the final question for tonight, favorite beekeeping hack?
beekeeping hack.
Yep.
Oh, listen to your bees. Yeah. Because they're listening to you. So when I approach, I mean, I might go up to the apiary and I might think I'm going to do this, this, and this. You know, I'm going to look at hive number 3, and no, I think hive number 5 must be. But as soon as I get there, the first thing I do is listen to the bees, the humming, the sound, how they're flying, and then I decide what I'm going to do. And likewise, they're listening to me. So if I'm agitated or angry, or I've just got off the phone to the electrical company for 40 minutes, I don't go beekeeping after that. So I go when I'm calm, when I've got plenty of time, and sing, talk to the bees as you're working, let them know who's handling them as well. Yeah, so I do that. Yeah.
Wonderful advice, Amanda. I tell you what, I feel like I've been on a journey around the world in 50 minutes without a passport, and I've loved every minute of this discussion with you tonight.
It's lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed, hearing about your journeys in Eastern Europe, your current journeys in Morocco, living in Australia, volunteering in Be Urban in London. You truly are like a protege of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, and I am truly inspired by what you are doing. And please keep doing it. Please keep showcasing what you're doing. And if there's anything that we can do to help promote what you're doing, don't hesitate to get in touch. Now, one last thing, how can women reach you? What is the best way?
Probably, if we're not connected, come through my Facebook page initially. I'm at just Amanda Diamond, yes, on Facebook to do an initial. I've got other Instagram, especially for beekeeping, but I can send you off to places, yeah. But initially, that's just a very open platform. However we think about it, contact me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm going to invite our guest tonight to unmute for any questions you may have. I've tried to save it at least, well, I was hoping for 20 minutes, but I've given you 7 minutes to ask some questions of Amanda that you may have for her. And if there's no questions, that's okay too. You might have heard everything you need to hear for tonight. While I wait for questions, I'll just let people know that next month we're going to be talking to Simon Mulvaney from Save the Bees Australia about the varroa mite campaign he's been running, and about the recent detections of varroa mite on the South Australia and Victorian borders because of the almond pollination movements. Obviously, in a month, there's going to be a lot of change happening in that space, so it'll be interesting to catch up with him and have a chat also about a little bit more of an advocacy space rather than a bee adventurer space, but that'll also be a good discussion. So if there's no questions, I will once again thank the incredible Amanda Diamond, and thank you all for joining us tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next month at Live Bees. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along. Thank you especially, Amanda. See you later.
Okay, bye.